I shouldn't be alive to tell you this. Not after what happened. Not after where I went and what I saw. For 48 hours my body was gone, but I was more aware than I had ever been in my entire life, and what I encountered during that time didn't just change me, it destroyed everything I thought I knew about God. My name is Yusuf. I am 34 years old. I was born and raised in northern Nigeria, in a home where Islam was not just religion. It was identity. It was honor. It was survival. My father was a respected man in our community. People came to him for advice and judgment. And from the time I was a child, I was taught what it meant to be a good Muslim. Pray 5 times a day. Memorize the Quran. Obey without question. Fear Allah and never allow doubt to take root. I followed those instructions with discipline. I woke up before sunrise for Fajr even. When my body ached, I fasted during Ramadan. Even when my throat burned from thirst, I recited verses until my voice grew hoarse and people praised me for my dedication. They would say, Yusuf is strong, Yusuf is faithful, Yusuf will make his family proud. And I believed them, or at least I tried to. But there was something inside me I could never silence. Even as a boy, I remember lying awake at night after prayer, staring into the darkness, asking questions. I was too afraid to speak during the day. Allah, do you hear me? Why do I feel nothing? Why does everyone else seem so certain when I am not? The silence that followed those questions was not peaceful. It was heavy. It pressed against my chest, like something unseen was watching but not responding. I learned to hide that feeling. I learned that faith was not about what you felt. It was about what you did. So I became better at doing. I became louder in my recitation, stricter in my habits, more disciplined in my outward life. But inside the emptiness only grew. It followed me into adulthood, into my work, into my relationships, into every quiet moment where I had to face myself alone. There were times I would stand in prayer, repeating the words I had memorized since childhood, and suddenly I would feel disconnected, as if I was watching myself from outside my body, going through motions that had no life in them, and that thought terrified me, because in my world, doubt was not weakness, it was danger. It could cost you your family, your reputation, even your safety. So I buried it deeper. I told myself, this is normal, this is just a test. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that something was missing. Afraid that maybe I didn't know God at all. If you are listening to us, me right now, and something in your chest feels tight, something in your mind is questioning, but you are too afraid to say it out loud, I understand that feeling more than you know, and I want to say this gently. Stay with me. Listen to the end, because stories like mine are not just stories. They are survival. They are truth breaking through fear. And if this reaches you in that quiet place where you feel alone, do not ignore it. Share it. Let someone else hear it too, because I almost did not make it far enough to tell this story. Everything changed the day my life collapsed in a way I never expected. I thought I understood suffering. I thought I understood faith. But I was about to face something that would strip away every illusion I had built. Something that would force me to confront the truth in a way I could never undo. I did not know it then, but that moment, that breaking point, was already coming closer than I could see. And when it arrived, it would take everything from me, including my life, or at least the life I thought I had, until the day I stopped breathing, and everything I believed began to unravel. Every day of my life moved with the same rhythm, a pattern so familiar, it became part of my identity. Fajr before the sun rose, pulling me from sleep while the world was still silent. Juhr in the heat of the day, Asr as the light softened Maghrib, as the sky burned orange, and Isha before the night settled fully over us. My life was measured in prayer, time structured, disciplined, predictable, and from the outside it looked like peace. People saw consistency. They saw devotion. They saw a man who feared God and followed the straight path. My father would look at me with quiet approval, and that approval meant everything to me, because in our home, obedience was love and discipline was respect. But inside I was tired, not physically but spiritually drained in a way I could not explain, because no matter how many times I bowed my head to the ground, no matter how many verses I recited, I never felt close to God. I felt like I was reaching into something empty, like my words were disappearing before they reached anything real. And that thought scared me more than anything else, because I had been taught that God was near, that He hears, that He sees everything. So why did I feel so alone? I remember one moment clearly. It stayed with me because it was the first time I could not ignore what I felt. I had just finished reciting a long passage from the Quran. My voice steady, controlled every word pronounced with precision. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment, and then someone said, "MashaAllah, Yusuf, your recitation is beautiful," and others nodded in agreement, smiling at me with approval. I smiled back, but inside something cracked, because I realized in that moment that I could say every word perfectly, and still feel absolutely nothing. There was no connection, no warmth, no sense of being heard, only performance and expectation. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my chest tight, my thoughts louder than they had ever been. "What is wrong with me?" I whispered into the darkness. "Why don't I feel Him?" I tried to push the thought away. I told myself, this is weakness, this is doubt, this is dangerous, but it did not leave. It returned again and again, growing stronger each time. Then the questions began quietly, at first almost like whispers in the back of my mind. Why does God feel so distant? Why is everything based on fear? Why do I feel more anxious after I pray instead of at peace? I did not say these questions out loud. I could not, because I knew what would happen. People do not respond gently to questions like that. They respond with correction, with warning, sometimes with anger. So I stayed silent. I continued my routine. I prayed louder. I fasted more strictly. I corrected others when they made mistakes, hoping that if I strengthened my outward discipline, my inward struggle would disappear. But it did not. It only became more obvious, more difficult to ignore, because the harder I tried, the clearer it became that something was missing, and I did not know how to find it. Then came a moment that shook me in a way I could not forget. I was sitting with a group of men after Jummah prayer, the air still warm, the conversation casual, until one of them asked a question that changed everything. How do we know Allah accepts us? The room went quiet for a second, and then someone laughed softly. You don't, you just hope. The others nodded as if that answer was enough, as if uncertainty was normal, as if a lifetime of effort leading to hope alone was acceptable. But something inside me froze, because those words did not bring comfort. They brought fear. You just hope. After all the prayers, after all the discipline, after all the fear, there was no certainty, no assurance, only hope that maybe it was enough. That night I could not sleep. I turned from one side to the other, my mind repeating those words over and over. You just hope. And for the first time in my life, I allowed a thought to form fully without pushing it away. What if I have been wrong my whole life? My heart started beating faster as soon as I thought it, and I sat up quickly as if I could escape it. No, I said to myself, that is dangerous. Do not think like that. But the thought did not leave it, stayed with me, pressing against my mind, refusing to be ignored. And in that moment I felt something shift, something I could not explain, as if a door I had kept closed for years had been forced open just enough to let something through. I did not realize it then, but I was already changing, and once that question entered my heart, there was no way to remove it, because truth, once it begins to surface, does not go back into silence, and I was standing on the edge of something I did not understand, something that would soon demand an answer I was not ready to give. The moment that broke me did not arrive like a sudden storm. It came slowly, like pressure building beneath the surface, until I could no longer hold it together. My younger sister Amina was the closest person to me in the world. She was gentle in a way that made people feel safe, and she had a way of speaking that was soft but honest. She was the only one in our family who ever looked at me and asked, "Yusuf, are you really okay?" And most of the time I would just nod, because that was easier than telling the truth. One night she came into my room, her eyes red, her hands shaking slightly. "Yusuf, I am scared," she said, and something in her voice made me sit up immediately. "What happened?" I asked, trying to stay calm but already feeling something heavy forming in my chest. She hesitated like she was afraid of her own words, and then she whispered, "I do not feel anything. When I pray, the room felt like it went silent in a way that was louder than noise because those words were mine. They were the same thoughts I had buried for years, the same fear I had never spoken out loud, and now she was saying them to me. I knew what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to correct her, remind her that faith is not about feeling, that doubt is a test that she must push through it. That is what a good Muslim brother would say. That is what I had been taught. But I could not say it because it would have been a lie, and for a moment I felt exposed like she had somehow seen into me without trying. So instead I said the only thing I could. "It is just a test. Keep praying." She nodded slowly, but her eyes did not change. There was still uncertainty. There is still fear, and I knew she did not believe me. Not completely. A few weeks later, she became sick. At first it seemed small, just a fever weakness, something we thought would pass, but it did not pass. It grew worse each day, her energy fading, her voice becoming quieter. We prayed over her. We recited the Quran. We called others to pray. I fasted for her. I begged Allah to heal her. I stayed up through the night, asking for mercy, asking for intervention, telling myself that this is when faith matters. This is when God responds. But nothing changed. She kept getting weaker, and the more I prayed, the more desperate I became, because I could not understand why there was no answer. One night I sat beside her bed, holding her hand. It felt colder than usual, and she looked at me with eyes that were calm in a way that made me uncomfortable. "Yusuf," she said softly, "I am tired." "No, do not say that," I replied quickly, forcing confidence into my voice. "We'll be okay. You just need rest." She kept looking at me, and then she asked something that broke something deep inside me. "Do you think God hears us?" My mouth opened, but no words came out because I did not know the answer, and for the first time in my life, I did not pretend. I did not give her something rehearsed. I just sat there silent, and that silence felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. She died the next morning just like that. No miracle, no sudden recovery, no sign that our prayers had been heard. I stood at her burial, feeling like I was watching someone else's life from a distance. People spoke around me, offering the usual words. It was Allah's will, be patient. This life is temporary, but none of it reached me, because inside, something had collapsed completely. I had done everything I was supposed to do. I had prayed, I had fasted, I had believed, and it changed nothing. That night I locked myself in my room. I did not pray for the first time in my life. I did not pray. I sat on the floor staring at nothing, my thoughts loud, my chest tight. "Where were you?" I said quietly at first, and then louder. "Where were you?" My voice shook as the question repeated again and again, filling the room with something that felt like anger and grief mixed together. Silence answered me, the same silence I had known my entire life. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like abandonment. Something inside me snapped in that moment, and I said words I never thought I would say. "If you are real, show me. I cannot keep doing this. I cannot keep pretending. I cannot live like this anymore." My head felt heavy, my body weak, as if something was pulling me down. And the last thing I remember was the room fading, the sea, the edges of my vision going dark as I fell forward, everything disappearing into nothingness, as if the life I knew had been completely shut off and I had no control over what was coming next. At first there was nothing, no sound, no light, no sense of time, only awareness, and even that felt unfamiliar, like I was conscious without a body, without breath, without weight. I tried to move, but there was nothing to move. No arms, no legs, no physical form, only thought, and the realization that I was still somehow existing, That realization should have comforted me, but it did not. It filled me with fear because I knew something was wrong. I knew this was not sleep, and it was not a dream. It felt too real, too clear, too present. I tried to speak, but there was no voice, only intention, and even that seemed to disappear into the emptiness around me. Then slowly, something began to change. I became aware of darkness, not just the absence of light, but something deeper, something that felt alive in a way I could not explain. It surrounded me, but it was not touching me. It was like being suspended in a space that had no boundaries, no direction, no end. I could not tell if I was moving or if everything else was shifting around me. Time did not exist the way I understood it. Moments stretched endlessly and yet passed instantly at the same time. And within that strange awareness, something else began to rise, a feeling I could not ignore. Exposure. It felt like everything I had ever been. Every thought, every intention, every hidden fear was being revealed, not to someone else, but to myself. There was no hiding, no pretending, no identity to protect. I was not Yusuf the son, or Yusuf the brother, or Yusuf the good Muslim. I was simply me, stripped of everything. And that terrified me, because without those labels, I did not know who I was. I began to remember my life, not as a series of events, but as something deeper, like seeing the truth behind everything I had done, the prayers I had performed, the words I had spoken, the doubts I had buried. And with each memory came a weight, not condemnation exactly, but clarity. And that clarity was uncomfortable, because it showed me how much of my life had been built on fear rather than understanding, on obedience. Without connection, I wanted to escape that feeling, but there was nowhere to go. The awareness followed me. It surrounded me. It became impossible to ignore. Then the fear grew stronger, not because something attacked me, but because I realized I had no control. I could not return to my body. I could not wake up. I could not change what was happening. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to be completely surrendered, not by choice, but by reality. I began to think about death, about judgment, about everything I had been taught, and the question formed in my mind with a force I could not resist. What if I am not ready? That thought echoed through me louder than anything else, and with it came a sense of urgency, a need for something I could not define. I tried to call out to Allah, not with words but with intention, with desperation. But again, there was no response, no sense of being heard, only the same silence that had followed me throughout my life. But now it felt heavier, more final, as if I had reached a place where my questions could no longer be ignored, but still had no answers. The darkness around me seemed to shift slightly, not moving but changing in a way that made me more aware of its presence. And with that awareness came something new, not light, not yet, but a difference, a subtle change that drew my attention. Without explanation, I focused on it, instinctively, because it was the only thing that felt different from everything else. And as I did, the fear inside me began to mix with something else. Anticipation. I did not understand it, but I could feel it building, like something was about to happen, something I could not stop, something I could not avoid. The awareness grew stronger. The sense that I was not alone became impossible to ignore, even though I could not see anything clearly. There was a presence forming, not around me, but approaching me, and with that realization, my fear reached its highest point, because I knew deep inside me that whatever was coming would change everything. I believed everything I understood about God, about truth, about myself. I wanted to turn away. I wanted to hide, but I could not. There was nowhere to go and no way to escape. And as that presence drew closer, I felt something I had never felt before. Not just fear, but recognition, as if something within me knew before my mind could understand. And in that moment, as the darkness seemed to hold its breath and everything around me became still, I realized I was about to encounter something real, something undeniable, something that would answer the question I had carried my entire life, and I was not sure if I was ready to face it. The presence did not rush toward me. It came with a calm that felt intentional, like every movement was measured and purposeful, and as it drew closer, the darkness around me did not fight it or resist it. It simply began to fade, not all at once but gradually, like something giving way to a greater reality. I could not see a form clearly at first, but I felt something I had never experienced before, and it was not fear. This time, it was something deeper, something that reached into me and exposed everything, while at the same time making me feel seen in a way that was impossible to describe. I did not understand it, but I knew I was not alone anymore. Then the light became clearer, not blinding, not overwhelming, but pure in a way that made everything else feel insignificant. And within that light, I became aware of him. I cannot explain how I knew, but I knew. There was no confusion, no doubt, no question in my mind. The moment I became aware of his presence, something inside me responded as if it had been waiting my entire life. For this moment, I felt both undone and held at the same time, like every part of me was being revealed, and yet I was not being rejected. I wanted to speak, but I could not find words. I wanted to hide, but I could not move. And then he spoke not, with a voice that echoed in the air, but directly into me, in a way that was clearer than any sound. Yusuf, the way he said my name, it was not like anyone had ever said it before. It carried understanding. It carried authority. It carried something that made me feel known, completely known, in a way that made my defenses collapse instantly. I did not ask who he was because I already knew, and that realization shook me more than anything else because it went against everything I had been taught my entire life. This is not possible. I thought this cannot be real, but the more I tried to deny it, the more undeniable it became. His presence was not something I could argue with. It was truth standing in front of me without needing to prove itself. "Why do you fear?" he asked, and the question cut through me because it revealed something I had never fully admitted. I am not enough. I answered without thinking, the words coming from a place deeper than my mind. I have tried, I have prayed, I have obeyed, but I do not know if I am accepted. There was a pause, not silence, but a moment that felt intentional, like he was allowing me to fully hear what I had just said. Then he responded not with correction, but with something that broke me open. "You were never meant to earn what is given by love." That sentence, it shattered something inside me because it was so simple, and yet it contradicted everything I had built my life on. I felt memories rising within me, all the moments of striving, all the fear, all the effort to be enough, and suddenly I saw them differently, not as strength but as weight I could not carry. I felt exposed again, but this time it was different. This time I did not feel judged. I felt understood. I felt seen and still accepted. How can this be true? I thought, how can I stand here with everything revealed and not be rejected? And then I understood something without needing it. Explained. His presence was not based on what I had done. It was based on who he was. And that realization was overwhelming. I felt something break inside me. Not in a painful way, but in a releasing way. Like something I had been holding for years had finally let go, and in that moment I felt peace, real peace. Not the kind I tried to convince myself I had, but something deeper. Something that settled into me and made everything else seem distant. "I do not understand," I said again. Not out of resistance, but out of honesty. "This is not what I was taught. This is not what I believed." He did not respond with argument. He responded with truth that felt alive. "I am the way, the truth, and the life." The words settled into me in a way I could not ignore. And even though I had never read them before, they felt familiar, like something my soul recognized before my mind could process it. "You searched for me in fear," he continued, "but I am found in truth and love." And in that moment, everything I had questioned, everything I had doubted, everything I had feared began to make sense, not all at once, but enough for me to realize that what I was experiencing was real, and it was changing me. I did not feel forced, I did not feel controlled, I felt invited, and that invitation was more powerful than any command I had ever followed. If this is true, I thought, if this is real, then everything in my life must change. And that thought brought both clarity and fear, because I knew what it would cost. I knew what it would mean for my family, my identity, my world. And yet, even with that fear, there was something stronger growing inside me, something I could not ignore, something that made me realize I could not go back to who I was before. And as I stood in that presence, feeling both undone and restored at the same time, one question rose above all the others. If this is true, what does it mean for my life? When I opened my eyes again, the world felt wrong, not because it had changed, but because I was lying on a hospital bed, the sound of machines steady around me, voices low and distant, as if they were coming from another place. My body felt heavy, like I had been pulled back into something I no longer fully belonged to. I tried to move, and pain spread through me, slowly reminding me that I was alive, that somehow, after everything I had experienced, I was back. My mother was sitting beside me, her eyes swollen from crying when she saw me awake. She gasped. "Yusuf, you are back," she said, gripping my hand tightly, as if she was afraid I would disappear again. I wanted to respond, but my voice felt weak, my throat dry. I forced out a single word. "How long?" Her face shifted between relief and fear. 2 days, she said. "You were gone for 2 days." The words settled up into me with weight. 48 hours, the same time I had experienced outside of this world. But what I had seen in that time felt longer, deeper, more real than anything I had ever known. I closed my eyes again, not to sleep, but to remember. And the memory came back immediately. The presence, the voice, the truth. It was not fading like a dream. It was clear, solid, impossible to dismiss. And that terrified me because it meant I could not pretend it did not happen. The days that followed felt like I was living between two realities. On the outside, I was recovering, answering questions, explaining nothing, giving simple responses, so no one would ask too much. But inside, everything was shifting. Every thought, every belief, every assumption I had carried was being examined by something I could not ignore. I tried to return to normal. I stood for prayer again. I recited the words I had memorized my whole life, but something was different this time. The words felt empty in a way they never had before, not because I was distracted, but because I had experienced something real, and now everything else felt like an echo. I stopped halfway through one prayer, my body frozen as the realization hit me. I cannot do this the same way anymore. That thought alone filled me with fear, because I knew what it meant. I knew what would happen if anyone noticed, if anyone understood what was changing inside me. So I stayed silent. I kept my routine outwardly, while everything inside me began to shift in a direction I could not control. At night, when everyone was asleep, I would sit with my phone, the screen dim, my heart racing as I searched for answers. I did not even know what I was looking for at first, until one word came to my mind: Jesus. I hesitated before typing it, as if even searching it was crossing a line I could not return from. But the memory of his presence pushed me forward, and when I finally searched, I found things I had never allowed myself to see before: testimonies, videos versus words that spoke about love in a way I had never understood. I downloaded a Bible app, my hands shaking slightly as I opened it, not knowing where to start until I came across a verse that stopped me completely. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I read it again, slowly, letting each word sink in. Rest, not fear, not uncertainty, not endless striving, but rest. Something inside me responded immediately, like a part of me had been waiting to hear those words. My entire life, I did not know how to explain it, but I felt peace again, the same kind of peace I had. I felt in that presence, and it confirmed something deep inside me, that what I experienced was not a dream. It was real, but with that peace came fear, because I knew what this meant. I knew what would happen if my father found out, if my community discovered what I was exploring. This was not a small change. This was everything, and everything had a cost. I started hiding my phone, deleting history, lowering brightness, listening with headphones, constantly aware of my surroundings. Every small sound made my heart race. Every unexpected question made me cautious. I was living in truth but hiding it at the same time. And that tension began to grow stronger each day. Until one evening, my father looked at me differently, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he noticed something that was not there. Before Yusuf, he said slowly, "You have changed." My heart skipped a beat, as those words settled into the room, and in that moment, I realized something I had been trying to avoid. I could not hide this forever. It was the moment my father said those words. Something inside me tightened in a way I could not control. "Yusuf, you have changed," he repeated, his voice calm, but carrying a weight I understood too well. He was not asking. He was observing, and in our home, observation was never casual. It was the beginning of something deeper. I forced a small smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am just recovering." That is all I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were weak. He studied me for a moment longer, his eyes searching my face as if trying to read something I was desperately trying to hide. Then he nodded slowly, but I could tell he was not convinced. From that day, everything shifted. The house that once felt structured and familiar began to feel tense, like every movement, every word, every silence was being watched. My mother became more attentive, asking me questions that seemed normal but felt loaded. My brothers watched me more closely. Small things began to matter: the way I prayed, the tone of my voice, the time I spent alone. Nothing escaped notice, and the more aware they became, the more careful I had to be. But inside, I was changing too quickly to keep up with the mask I had built. I would stand in prayer and feel the words die in my mouth. I would sit with my family as they spoke about faith and feel like I was listening from the outside, unable to fully agree, but too afraid to disagree. The pressure built slowly. At first, subtle comments, gentle corrections. "Yusuf, you missed a word. Yusuf, focus more. Yusuf, your heart must be present in prayer." Each statement sounded like concern, but carried an edge that made it clear they sensed something was wrong. I tried harder. I forced myself to go through the motions, to blend in, to appear unchanged. But the truth inside me refused to stay quiet, and the more I suppressed it, the heavier it became, until one night everything began to surface. I was in my room reading quietly, the light from my phone dim, when my door opened. Suddenly I looked up and saw my older brother standing there, his expression serious. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low. "Nothing," I replied quickly, locking my phone and placing it beside me. But he had already seen enough. His eyes moved to the device and then back to me. "Show me," he said. My chest tightened as fear rose instantly. "It is nothing," I repeated, trying to sound calm, but my voice betrayed me. He stepped closer, his tone sharpening. "Yusuf, show me the phone." I hesitated for just a second too long, and that was enough. He reached forward, taking it from my hand before I could react. My heart pounded as he unlocked it, scrolling quickly, his face changing as he saw what I had been reading. The Bible verses, the videos, the searches. His expression shifted from confusion to anger, to something deeper, something more dangerous. "What is this?" he asked, his voice no longer calm. I stayed silent because there were no words that could undo what he had already seen. His eyes locked onto mine. "Is this what you are filling your mind with?" he demanded. "Do you know what this is? Do you understand what you are doing?" I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, but the fear was overwhelming. "I am just reading," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice from shaking, but he cut me off. "Reading," he repeated sharply. "You are bringing corruption into this house." His voice had risen now, loud enough that others would hear, and within seconds my father entered the room, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. "What is happening?" he asked. My brother turned to him, holding up the phone as if it were evidence. "Yusuf is reading Christian material." The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. My father looked at me slowly, his expression unreadable at first, and then something hardened in his eyes. "Is this true?" he asked. I felt my throat close, my mind racing, searching for a way to respond without destroying everything, but there was no way out. Not anymore. Yes, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. The reaction was immediate. My mother gasped, my brother stepped back in disbelief, and my father remained still for a moment longer before speaking, his voice low, but filled with controlled anger. Do you understand what you are saying? Yusuf, do you understand what this means? I nodded, slightly unable to speak, because I did understand. I understood the cost, the consequences, the danger, but I also knew I could not lie anymore. His voice grew colder. Then you will stop this immediately. He said, you will return to the right path and you will not speak of this again, or you will lose everything. Those words settled into me with a finality I could not ignore, and in that moment I knew the truth had come to the surface, and there was no way to hide from it anymore. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in the darkness of my room, staring at the wall, my father's words echoing in my mind. You will lose everything. They were not spoken in anger. Alone they carried truth in them, a reality I had always known, but never had to face directly. Until now, I thought about my family, my mother's voice, my father's expectations, my brother's anger, everything that had shaped me, everything that had given me identity and belonging. And I felt the weight of what I was about to lose pressing down on me like something physical. I could almost feel it on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Part of me wanted to go back to pretend that none of this had happened, to say the words they needed to hear and restore everything to the way it was before, because that would be easier, safer, less painful. But every time that thought came another one. This followed stronger, clearer. I know the truth now, and I cannot unknow it. I closed my eyes, trying to silence the conflict inside me. But it only became louder. The memory of that presence, the peace I had felt, the words that had reached into me and changed something at my core. They were not fading. They were becoming more real with each passing moment. And I realized something I had been avoiding. This was not just a belief. This was a decision. And every decision comes with a cost. The morning came slowly. The light entering my room felt different, like it was exposing something I could no longer hide. I heard movement in the house, voices, low conversations already happening about me, about what I had done, about what would happen next, and for a moment, I stayed where I was sitting on the edge of my bed, my hands resting on my knees, my heart beating steadily. Not fast, not panicked, just steady like something inside me had settled. I whispered quietly, not knowing exactly how to pray anymore, but speaking anyway. I cannot go back. The words felt simple, but they carried everything in them. Fear, loss, uncertainty, but also clarity. I stood up slowly and walked out of my room, each step feeling deliberate, like I was crossing a line I could never cross back over. My father was in the main room, sitting upright, his posture firm, my brother beside him, my mother standing slightly behind them. Her face tense when they saw me enter the room, went silent and all attention shifted to me. Yusuf, my father said, his voice calm but heavy. Have you thought about what we discussed? I nodded slowly. Yes, I have. He waited, expecting more, expecting correction, apology, something that would restore order, but I did not give it. I took a breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to say, and then I spoke. I cannot deny what I have seen. The words hung in the air, immediately changing everything. My brother reacted first, his voice sharp. What are you saying? You are choosing this over your own family? I did not respond to him. I kept my eyes on my father, because this was not about argument. It was about truth. His expression hardened further. You are confused, he said firmly. This is not truth. This is deception. You will abandon this. Now I felt the fear rise again, but it did not control me. Not the way it used to. I shook my head slowly. I cannot. His voice grew louder. Then you are choosing to leave everything behind, your home, your name, your place in this family. Do you understand that? I nodded again, my throat tight, but my voice steady. Yes, I understand. My mother stepped forward, her voice breaking. Yusuf, please do not do this. You are our son. Do not throw your life away. Her words cut deeper than anything else because they came from love, from fear, from a place that wanted to protect me. And for a moment, I felt myself almost give in, almost say what she needed to hear. But the truth inside me did not move, it stayed firm. I am not throwing my life away, I said quietly. I am finding it. The room fell into a deeper silence after that, because there was nothing left to argue. I had made my decision, and they could see it in me, not just in my words, but in something deeper, something that could not be forced or changed. My father stood slowly, his presence filling the room. "Then you are no longer under this roof," he said. "You will leave today." Those words landed with finality, and even though I had expected them, they still hurt more than I could. "Explain." I looked at my mother one last time, her eyes filled with tears, my brother shaking his head in anger and disappointment. And then I turned away because staying any longer would only make it harder. I walked back to my room, packed what little I could carry, my hands steady even though my chest felt heavy, and when I stepped out of that house, I did not look back, not because it did not matter, but because I knew if I did, I might not have the strength to keep going. And as I walked away from everything I had ever known, I felt something unexpected rising within me. Not fear, not regret, but peace, quiet, steady, undeniable peace. And in that moment, I knew the line had been crossed, and there was no going back. I did not know where I was going. After I left the house, I just walked the streets with my small bag over my shoulder, feeling like I was no longer attached to anything familiar. Every step felt both heavy and light heavy because of what I had lost, and light because something inside me had finally stopped fighting itself. I kept replaying the last moment, my father's voice, my mother's tears, my brother's anger, all of it echoing in my mind. But strangely, none of it pulled me back. It only confirmed that what had happened was real and irreversible. I ended up staying with a distant cousin who agreed to take me in. But even there, I felt like a guest in my own life, sleeping lightly, waking often staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly, yet felt so certain at the same time. I avoided long conversations because I knew eventually they would ask questions I was not ready to answer fully. I spent most nights alone, scrolling through scripture on my phone, reading the same passages over and over, not because I fully understood them, but because they brought a peace I could not explain, and that peace scared me more than anything, because it did not come from anything I had been taught to trust. Days passed, and eventually my father asked to meet me. I knew it was coming before I even received the message. There was no anger in his request, only finality, as if he already knew what I would say, but still needed to hear it from my mouth. I agreed to meet him at a quiet place not far from where I was staying when I arrived. He was already there, sitting upright, his face composed, but his eyes carrying something heavier than words. My brother stood a little behind him, arms crossed, watching me carefully. The air between us felt thick, like something unresolved was waiting to break. My father spoke first. "Yusuf, this has gone far enough. You are still my son, but you are walking a path that leads to destruction." I listened quietly, my hands resting on my knees. I did not interrupt because I knew this was not a conversation. It was a final attempt to pull me back into what I had left. He continued, "We are not your enemy. We are trying to save you from confusion, from influence, from something you do not understand." His voice softened slightly at the end, as if appealing to the part of me that once would have agreed with him. My brother stepped forward, then his tone sharper. "You think you have found truth, but you are lost. You are embarrassing this family. Do you even realize what people are saying?" I looked at him, but I did not feel anger. I felt sorrow because I understood him better now than I ever had before. He was speaking from fear, not hatred, from protection, not understanding. And that realization changed how I responded. "I have not done this because I hate you," I said quietly, my voice steady but calm. "I have done this because I cannot deny what I experienced." My father leaned forward slightly. "What experience?" he asked firmly. "That vision, that dream, that confusion you call truth." I paused because I knew this was the moment everything would either collapse or become irreversible. I looked at both of them and said it clearly. I met Jesus. There was silence, immediately heavy and absolute. My brother let out a short, disbelieving laugh. My father closed his eyes briefly as if absorbing something painful, then opened them again. "Yusuf," he said slowly, "you are speaking dangerously. You do not understand what you are saying." "I understand more than I ever have," I replied, and as I said it, I felt something inside me strengthen, not pride, not rebellion, but clarity. My father shook his head. "This is not truth. This is deception. You are being led astray, and you are willing to destroy your entire life for it." I felt my heart tighten, but I did not step back. "I cannot deny him," I said softly, and that sentence changed the atmosphere completely. My brother looked away, shaking his head. My father's expression hardened again. "Then there is nothing more to say," he said quietly. "If you continue on this path, you are no longer part of this family." The words landed like a final closing door, but instead of breaking me, something unexpected happened. I felt a strange calm, not because I was happy, but because I was no longer uncertain. I stood slowly, my voice was steady. "I love you both," I said, "but I cannot return to what I no longer believe in." My mother was not there, but I imagined her reaction, and that hurt more than anything. I turned away first, because I knew if I stayed another moment, I would break in ways I could not repair. And as I walked away, I felt the weight of loss. But beneath it, something stronger was forming, something I could not explain. Yet I knew it was real, and for the first time I realized that losing everything had not ended me. It had revealed something new inside me, something that would not let me go back even if I wanted to. And I knew I was only at the beginning of a path I could never have imagined. Why, I did not sleep much in the days after that meeting, not because I was afraid of being alone, but because my mind no longer felt like the same place I used to live in. Everything felt stripped down, simpler, quieter, and yet more intense. I would sit for long periods just thinking, not about what I lost, but about what I had found. And I kept returning to the same moment over and over again. The presence, the voice, the overwhelming sense of being fully seen and fully known, without rejection. Even now, I cannot explain it in a way that makes sense to everyone, but I know what it did to me. It broke something in me, and at the same time, rebuilt something I did not know I needed. I found myself opening the Bible app more often, not out of curiosity anymore, but out of hunger. Like something inside me was finally being fed for the first time in my life. I read words that felt alive, not distant, not mechanical, but personal. "Come to me all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I read that line so many times I lost count, because it described exactly what I had been carrying for years, without realizing it. Burden, exhaustion, fear, expectation, and now something in me was beginning to understand what rest actually meant. Not escape, not denial, but peace that stays, even when everything around you changes. I started attending online gatherings quietly, at first keeping everything hidden from those around me, listening more than speaking, but even in silence I felt something new forming inside me. A sense that I was not alone anymore, not in the way I had always felt alone, even in a crowd, but in a deeper sense, like I had finally stepped into something larger than myself. I still thought about my family, and often my mother's tears, my father's final words, my brother's anger, and I did not stop feeling the weight of it, but it no longer defined me the same way it once did, because alongside the grief, there was something else growing: forgiveness, not because everything was fixed, but because I understood fear more clearly. Now I understood why they reacted the way they did, why truth felt threatening to them, and that understanding softened something inside me I did not know could soften. I began praying differently too, not with fear, not with performance, but with honesty. Sometimes I did not even have the right words. I would just sit quietly and say, "Jesus, I need you." And in those moments I felt something steady. Not emotional, not dramatic, but steady like standing on ground that does not move. Even when everything else does change, did not happen all at once. It was gradual, like healing always is. I lost relationships, but I gained clarity. I lost comfort, but gained truth. I lost identity, but slowly discovered something deeper than identity itself. I am not saying my life became easy. It did not. There are still days I feel the weight of what I left behind. There are still moments I miss my family so deeply it hurts. But even in those moments, I do not feel abandoned anymore. I feel held, and that is something I never knew was possible. If you are listening to this, and you are in that same place where I once was questioning, afraid, feeling trapped between what you were taught and what your heart is beginning to see, I want you to know you are not alone. I do not have all the answers, but I know what changed me. I know what gave me peace when nothing else could. And I know that what I encountered was not but emptiness. It was love, and that love did not demand perfection. It met me in my brokenness and lifted me up. And today, I am not the man I used to be. I am not defined by fear anymore. I am defined by something greater, something I cannot lose even when everything else is taken. And if there is one thing I want you to remember from my story, it is this: I did not find strength by holding on to everything I had. I found it when I finally let go and discovered that I was never alone. Even in the darkest moment of my life, I was being led towards something I could never have imagined. And that something gave me a new beginning, not just in belief, but in life itself.